He didn't even look at her when he said it. The music had stopped. The guests had gone silent, and Damien stood there at his own wedding, staring at his mother like she was a stranger who had wandered in from the street. "Take her out. She's embarrassing us." His voice was cold, sharp, final. Lydia froze with the microphone still in her shaking hand. She had only been trying to say how proud she was, how far they had come, but he didn't let her finish. He didn't even let her breathe, and that was the moment everything he had ever built began to fall apart. "Before we go deeper, take a second. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I love seeing how far our stories travel. And if you're new here, subscribe so you don't miss the next part. You'll understand why soon." Now, let's go back to where this story truly began. The ballroom smelled of roses and money. Gold-trimmed chandeliers cast soft light over polished marble floors. A string quartet played moments ago, but now there was only the sound of people trying not to react. Guests lowered their eyes, pretending not to see what was happening, pretending they weren't witnessing something unforgivable. Lydia stood there with her small, simple dress, the kind you buy on sale and alter at home. She had taken the bus that morning. Her hands were still rough from the night shifts she worked. Her smile had been wide when she arrived, proud, nervous, hopeful. Damien didn't look at her. His jaw was set, his posture tall, his tailored suit fitting him like it had been made for no one else, which it had. Everything about him said wealth, confidence, power. He had spent years building this image. He wouldn't let anything threaten it, especially not her. Two security guards approached her gently, as if she were something fragile. She swallowed hard, nodding before they even touched her. She stepped away from the microphone and held her purse close to her chest. Her eyes never left Damien's face, waiting for him to turn, to look, to say something, anything. But he didn't. Sienna, his new bride, stood beside him. Her hand rested on his arm. Her smile was thin, practiced, elegant, the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. She didn't look at Lydia either. Someone cleared their throat. A violinist shifted uncomfortably. A distant camera clicked, one final flash, and then the music started again. But the room didn't breathe the same way anymore. Lydia walked toward the exit, her steps small, careful, like she was afraid of making a sound. No one stopped her. No one asked if she was all right. No one followed. And Damien didn't look back. He raised his glass instead, lifted it high, forced the room to keep celebrating. Laughter returned slowly, strained at first, then louder as alcohol and pride drowned discomfort. The wedding continued. To everyone else, this was a perfect day, a union of families, a moment of triumph. But there are moments in life when something shifts quietly, silently, and even if no one notices at first, the consequences are already sealed. This was one of those moments. Later, when the music had ended, and the champagne glasses were empty and sticky with fingerprints, when guests were stepping out into chauffeured cars and black SUVs, Cole Winters watched Damien from a distance. Cole had seen everything. He had known Damien long before the suits, before the penthouse, before the shiny watch and the expensive cologne. He had known Damien when he was just a skinny kid with second-hand sneakers and a heart full of burning dreams. Cole didn't applaud. He didn't toast. He didn't pretend nothing happened. He just stared at his friend and felt something close inside him, like a door shutting. Damien didn't notice. He was too busy living in the moment he thought he had earned. He took Sienna by the hand. They laughed for the cameras. They posed beneath floral arches. They looked like a couple cut from a magazine page, perfect, untouchable, built for admiration. But perfection built on shame never lasts. And though he did not know it yet, Damien Carter had just thrown away the only person who ever loved him without conditions. The photographers captured smiles. But the story truly began with the picture that no one took, a mother stepping into the cold evening alone. No commentary, no reminders, just story. Before the suits, before the penthouse, before the wedding invitations printed in gold. There was a small apartment on the south side of Atlanta, a narrow hallway with peeling wallpaper and a kitchen light that flickered when the microwave ran. The kind of place where you could hear your neighbor's TV through the wall and footsteps in the stairwell at all hours of the night. Damien grew up there. The living room doubled as a bedroom. Lydia slept on a pull-out couch so Damien could have the only real bed. She always said a child needed proper sleep to learn, to grow. She never complained when her back ached in the mornings. She just stretched quietly and made him breakfast before her shift. Every day she tied her hair back, slipped on white sneakers with flattened soles, and took 2 buses to the assisted living center where she worked. Her hands were always rough from the cleaning chemicals, but she came home smiling anyway, like the exhaustion was something she could hide if she tried hard enough. Damien had 1 pair of good shoes. He cleaned them every night with a washcloth so they would look new the next day. He studied at the kitchen table with his textbooks spread out next to a pot of rice and beans. The apartment smelled like laundry detergent and fried onions most nights. They didn't have much. But they had each other. On winter evenings, when the air inside the apartment felt cold no matter how high the heater was turned up, Lydia would sit across from him with a cup of tea and watch him work. "You're going to make it," she'd say softly. Not loud, not dramatic, just certain. And Damien believed her. He didn't have a father to tell him how to be a man. Lydia didn't talk about him much, just that he was gone before Damien took his first steps. There was a watch, though, scratched, old, a little too big. Damien used to hold it when he was a kid, asking questions Lydia never answered fully. Some stories she kept tucked away, some pain she didn't let out. The neighborhood kids played ball in the street. Damien was fast, but he didn't have time to waste. He was always running somewhere, to school, to work, to the library before it closed. He wasn't trying to be better than anyone. He was just trying to escape the heaviness of never having enough. That's how he met Cole Winters. Cole lived 1 building over. He had a laugh that could break a bad mood in half. He didn't care that Damien didn't have new clothes. He didn't care that Lydia sometimes packed leftover cafeteria rolls in Damien's lunch. Cole saw someone who wanted, not the kind of want that begged, the kind that worked. They became brothers without saying it. When their classmates blew their paychecks on sneakers and new phones, Damien and Cole took city buses to job fairs. They sat at library computers applying to internships they weren't qualified for. They talked about futures bigger than the block they grew up on. At night, they would sit on the hood of an old car behind the apartment lot, staring at the skyline in the distance, those glowing towers in Midtown. "One day," Damien whispered once, "I'll live up there. I'll buy my mom a house. I'll give her everything she never had." Cole nudged him with his shoulder. "I know," he said. "You will." And for a long time that promise was enough to keep Damien grounded. But people change when they start climbing. Not all at once. Not suddenly, slowly, step by step, dollar by dollar. The skyline they once admired together began to look less like a dream and more like a measurement. It started with an internship, a small investment firm in Midtown. Damien got the position because he stayed after school to clean offices, and one night, one of the partners saw him reading financial textbooks while mopping the floors. The man didn't say much, just asked a few questions. The next week, Damien was in a suit 2 sizes too big, sitting in a cubicle taking notes like his life depended on it. He worked harder than everyone, not louder, not flashier, just harder. He arrived before sunrise and left after the streetlights buzzed to life. He made coffee runs, organized documents, studied financial models during lunch. When the others went home, he stayed and learned everything he could from the empty office and the glow of a desk lamp. He rose fast. Too fast for some. People whispered that he was trying too hard, that he didn't know how to fit in, that he didn't understand the unspoken rules. They were right. He didn't. He hadn't grown up with country clubs and ski trips. He didn't know how to laugh at the right jokes or talk about the right vacations. But he knew how to win. He learned how to dress, how to speak, how to keep his face still when others bragged about their family's money. He learned the cost of appearing unbothered. The first major deal he closed brought real money, more money than he had ever seen in his life. He remembered holding the check, staring at it, hands trembling like he had touched something sacred and dangerous at the same time. He didn't tell Lydia right away. He worked late that evening, walked home instead of calling a rideshare. The city lights reflected off glass towers like stars that had fallen and gotten stuck in concrete. He thought about the little apartment, the flickering kitchen light, the smell of laundry detergent drying on a rack by the window. He wondered if he should surprise her. He didn't. He went home to his new condo instead. He sat alone in silence. Not joy, not excitement, just numb relief. Success isn't fireworks. Sometimes it's just exhaustion that doesn't end. His clothes changed. His words changed. The way people looked at him changed. But Lydia stayed the same. She still made too much food when he visited. She still packed leftovers in containers for later. She still tucked her hair behind her ear when she laughed. She still told him to rest, to eat, to breathe. He loved her. But something unspoken had shifted. He stopped bringing Cole around to industry events. Cole didn't fit the new world. Not because of who he was, but because of what he reminded Damien of. Where he started, what he came from, what he was trying to outrun. People say success changes you, but sometimes it just reveals parts of you that were waiting for oxygen. As his income climbed, so did the distance between Damien and the person he had been. He didn't notice the change, not at first. Change rarely announces itself. It happens quietly, underneath the surface. A new watch, a new way of speaking, a new set of expectations, a new set of people who called themselves friends. And then, one evening, at a charity gala filled with soft jazz and crystal champagne flutes, he saw her. The moment that would rewrite everything. The moment the past began to loosen its grip. The moment the future shifted towards something glittering and dangerous. She turned before he spoke her name. Sienna Blake. She didn't need introduction. Sienna Blake was the kind of woman people noticed without understanding why. Not loud, not showy, just composed. Her presence was like marble, smooth, polished, expensive even before you touched it. She wore a black dress that didn't sparkle, didn't cling, didn't announce anything. It simply existed perfectly, the kind of elegance that doesn't need to explain itself. Damien saw her across the ballroom. She was laughing at something, not a loud laugh, but a small, knowing one, the kind that said she already understood the joke before it was spoken. Men in tailored suits leaned in to earn another one. Women watched her from the corner of their eyes. Sienna glanced toward Damien at the exact moment he looked away. Not a coincidence. Some people can feel when they're being watched. She approached first. "You're Damien Carter," she said, like she wasn't asking a question. Her voice was steady, quiet, and sure, like someone who had never been told to repeat herself. Damien nodded. "And you're Sienna Blake," he replied, though his tone held a hint of caution. Her name was known. Her family was known. Old Atlanta wealth. The kind built on land and legacy, not salary and strategy. "People talk about you," she said. "The boy who climbed the skyline." He almost smiled, not because of the words, but because of how she said boy. Not disrespectful, not mocking, just observant, like she was placing him carefully somewhere on an invisible map. The conversation felt like a negotiation masked as flirtation. She asked questions the way investors do, direct, efficient, purposeful. He answered the way he had been trained to, sharp, controlled, polished. But something was happening underneath the words, something neither of them acknowledged. She saw his ambition. He saw her access. A partnership before romance, a calculation before affection. A future being negotiated quietly in real time. Cole watched from the bar. He didn't like the look in Sienna's eyes. Not because she was cold, but because she was interested for the wrong reasons. Cole had seen this type before. They didn't build, they attached. Later that night, when the gala lights dimmed and the crowd began to thin, Damien walked Sienna to the valet. The air outside was cool, streetlights glowing warm against the pavement. She looked at him like she had already decided. "Call me," she said. "Not if you'd like to. Not I'd like to see you again. Just a statement." She was giving him access. He was accepting the invitation. When her car pulled away, Damien stood on the sidewalk for a moment, hands in his pockets, his breath visible in the cold night air. He did not think of the small apartment. He did not think of Lydia washing her uniform in the sink. He did not think of the promise he once made under the streetlight glow with Cole. He thought of skyline views and private restaurants and ballrooms filled with chandeliers and laughter that sounded like belonging. Sienna was not just a woman. She was a doorway. And Damien, hungry, driven, starved for validation no one ever taught him how to resist, stepped through it without hesitation. The first time Lydia met Sienna was on a Sunday afternoon. Damien had called her that morning, his voice bright in a way she hadn't heard since he was a teenager. He asked if she could make her peach cobbler, the one she used to bake when rent was overdue and laughter was the only thing they had left. Lydia had smiled into the phone. She spent hours in the kitchen, sugar, butter, cinnamon, memories. The smell filled the apartment the way sunlight fills a window, sweet, familiar, warm. When Damien arrived, Sienna was with him. Sienna looked around the apartment like it was a hotel lobby she hadn't expected to be quite so small. Her expression didn't change, but Lydia felt it anyway. Lydia always felt things. The couch, the old carpet, the family photos in mismatched frames. All of it existed outside the world Damien now lived in. Lydia wiped her hands on her apron and stepped forward. "It's so good to finally meet you, Sienna," she said. Sienna smiled, polite, restrained. "You have a lovely home." She didn't mean it, but Lydia nodded anyway. Damien took a seat at the small kitchen table. Sienna sat beside him, crossing her legs, posture straight, as though the chair were something she needed to balance on carefully. Lydia cut the cobbler and placed the plates in front of them. Damien picked up his fork. Sienna didn't. She looked at the cobbler for a long moment. "Oh," she said lightly, "I'm actually avoiding sugar right now. My trainer would kill me if I even looked at something like this." She laughed. A few seconds too long. No one joined in. Damien hesitated. He set his fork down. Lydia's hand stilled against the table. It was small. So small. Just a moment. A gesture. A choice. But it was the first time Lydia felt him leaving. Not physically, not geographically, but drifting. Away from her table, away from the life they shared, away from the version of himself that remembered. The conversation that followed was light, shallow, floating on the surface of things. Sienna talked about events, fundraisers, the art show at the High Museum. Damien chimed in, fluent now in the language of people who never had to count groceries before reaching the register. Lydia listened. She smiled when they looked at her. She nodded when it fit. She laughed softly, even when she didn't understand the joke. When they left, she stood in the doorway watching the two of them walk down the stairwell. Damien held Sienna's coat. Sienna leaned into him, whispering something that made him smirk. They looked perfect together. When Lydia closed the apartment door, the silence felt different. She sat at the kitchen table and traced the ring of heat the cobbler dish had left behind. The spoon next to her plate still smelled like cinnamon. Her hands trembled in a way she couldn't explain. There are heartbreaks that do not require betrayal, only distance. That night, Lydia folded her son's childhood blanket and placed it back into the drawer where she kept things no one else knew about. She ran her hand along the doorway where she used to mark his height with a pencil, faint little lines growing taller each year. She pressed her forehead to the wood. No tears, just knowing. Some things break quietly. The rehearsal dinner was held at the Piedmont Club, one of those places where even the doormen look like they come from old money. White linens, crystal glasses, a pianist playing softly in the corner. The Blake family arrived in tailored silence, men in navy suits, women in pearls that had been worn by their grandmothers and their grandmothers before them. Their smiles were thin and polite, the kind that could cut if you stood too close. Lydia arrived alone. She wore her best dress, pale blue, ironed 3 times to smooth the fabric. She took the bus again, because Damien insisted the driver was already too busy with arrangements. She walked through the doors slowly, unsure if she was allowed to feel proud here. Damien saw her. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. It was the smile of a man trying to fit 2 lives into the same room. He walked over and kissed her cheek once, quick, like he was late for something. "Ma," he said softly, "you made it." "I wouldn't miss it," she replied. She meant it. Sienna approached, perfect posture, perfect dress, perfect composure. "Lydia," she said warmly enough that it could almost pass for genuine, "come sit near us." But the seat she motioned to was at the far end of the table, away from the family, away from Damien. Lydia didn't say anything. She simply sat. Dinner began. Speeches followed. Everyone spoke about elegance, status, legacy, and continuing family reputation. They talked about the merging of 2 names like it was a business transaction. The words love and trust were barely mentioned. Lydia kept her hands folded in her lap, nodding when it seemed proper, smiling when expected. She didn't belong in this room, but she was here for her son, not for acceptance. When the time came for toasts, guests raised their glasses. Laughter floated across the table like perfume. For a moment, it seemed the evening might end without fracture. But then Lydia reached into her purse, a small, worn watch, the one Damien used to ask about. She held it carefully in both hands, like she was carrying a memory that might shatter if she moved too fast. "Damien," she said quietly, standing. Her voice shook just a little. "This was your father's. I want you to wear it on your wedding day. I know it's old, but—" Sienna's smile cracked for the first time. Damien stared at the watch. The room watched him. Not Lydia, not the history. Him. Damien forced a laugh. "Oh, Mom, that's not really my style anymore." Lydia nodded once, trying to hide the sting. She held the watch toward him again, not to insist, just to offer. Sienna placed her hand on Damien's arm. "You don't have to wear something that doesn't fit the image we're building," she said softly. "We have the Cartier we picked out, remember?" The words drifted across the table, elegant and devastating. Lydia's fingers curled around the watch. She lowered her hand slowly. She sat down without a sound. Cole watched from across the table, jaw tight. He leaned forward. "Dame," he said under his breath, "she's just trying to give you something real." Damien didn't look at him. He didn't look at Lydia either. He lifted his glass. "To new beginnings." The room echoed the toast. Lydia lowered her eyes. And the watch, that small, quiet piece of the life they once shared, rested in her lap, heavier than anything she had ever carried. Outside, the city lights flickered against the evening sky. Inside, something small and irreplaceable shifted. Not broken yet, but close. The wedding day came wrapped in sunlight and silk. The venue stood on the edge of Buckhead, a mansion of white columns and manicured gardens, the kind of place built for photographs and legacy. Guests arrived in black cars that gleamed like mirrors. Laughter floated like champagne bubbles. Everything looked flawless. Everything was supposed to be flawless. Lydia arrived alone again. She wore the same pale blue dress from the rehearsal dinner. Her hands clutched a small brown purse. Inside, the watch. She had cleaned it one more time the night before, polishing the metal with the corner of a dish towel until it shined like something new. No driver waited for her. No arm guided her forward. But she walked with quiet pride. This was her son's day, her baby boy. The ceremony was beautiful. Roses, string quartet, white aisle. Damien and Sienna stood like royalty beneath an arch of orchids. When they kissed, the crowd erupted in applause. Lydia clapped too. Her eyes filled, but she held the tears back. Not because she didn't feel them, but because joy was meant to be witnessed, not hidden. Photos followed. Toasts, applause. The ballroom glittered with champagne light. Then came the moment for speeches. Sienna's father spoke first, talking about legacy and business alignment. The room applauded. And then Lydia stood. She didn't rush, she didn't stumble. She just held the microphone gently, as if afraid of crushing it. "I don't have fancy words," she began softly, "but I want to say how proud I am of you, Damien. When you were little, you used to fall asleep at the kitchen table doing homework, and I'd just sit and watch and—" Sienna leaned into Damien and whispered something. Damien's jaw tightened. He looked at his mother. Really looked. And for a split second, barely there, something flickered behind his eyes. A memory. A warmth. A trace of who he used to be. Then it vanished. He stepped forward and placed his hand over the microphone. "That's enough, Mom." The room froze. Lydia blinked. "Oh, I'm sorry. I was only—" "You're making this emotional. This is supposed to be elegant." His voice was sharp, controlled, a blade hidden in silk. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Sienna watched. Cole stood at the edge of the room, breath caught in his chest. Lydia swallowed and tried to continue, voice small now. "I just wanted to say how much I love—" Damien didn't let her finish. "Security," he said quietly. The words slid across the room like ice. 2 men approached, dressed in black. Soft steps, eyes lowered, but firm. Lydia stepped back. "Damien," she whispered, "please, I'm sorry if I said, I didn't mean, I just—" He couldn't look at her. Not because she embarrassed him, but because looking at her would mean seeing the truth of what he had become. "Take her outside," he said. His voice was final, no tremor, no hesitation, just distance. The guests stared at their glasses, their shoes, their plates, anything except the woman being escorted out. She didn't struggle, she didn't speak, she didn't cry. She simply walked. Tiny steps, quiet steps, holding her purse to her chest. Inside the purse, the watch pressed against her ribs. The last piece of the man she raised. Cole followed her with his eyes until the door closed. Then he looked at Damien, really looked, and something in him broke. Damien lifted his champagne glass again. "To love," he said. The room repeated the words, voices thin and fragile, but love had already left the building, and no one realized it yet. Not even him. The wedding photos were perfect, smiling faces, sparkling crystal, hands intertwined like they had known love all their lives. Online, people called it the wedding of the season. Magazines reposted the decor, influencers praised the dress. Everyone saw luxury, no one saw what it cost. Damien and Sienna moved into a penthouse overlooking the skyline. Floor-to-ceiling windows, marble counters, quiet halls that made every sound feel intentional. On paper, it was everything Damien had once dreamed of. But the silence was different here. There were no footsteps in the hallway, no soft humming from the stove, no warmth of someone waiting for him to come home. Just space, and echo, and a view that didn't comfort him the way he expected. Sienna adapted easily. She filled the space with designer throws, curated art pieces, rare coffee table books no one was allowed to touch. She hosted gatherings, not parties gatherings, the kind where people spoke in soft voices about business deals and gallery openings. Damien stood beside her, smiling when appropriate, nodding when necessary, offering conversation that sounded right but felt distant. He tried calling Lydia once, just once. He let the phone ring twice before hanging up. He told himself she was probably sleeping after her shift. He told himself she needed time to recover from the embarrassment. He told himself he would call tomorrow, Tomorrow came every day for a month. He never called. Cole didn't speak to him either. The last thing Cole said was at the wedding reception, while the DJ was changing tracks and guests pretended nothing had happened. "You crossed a line you can't uncross," he said quietly, standing beside Damien but not looking at him. "And one day you're going to feel it. Not immediately, but it's coming." Damien didn't respond. At the time, he thought Cole was being dramatic, but something did start to shift. Slowly, quietly, almost unnoticed. Business partners who once greeted him warmly began sending assistants in their place. Meetings were postponed, deals slowed down, invitations to private dinners stopped arriving. People still smiled at him, but something had changed in the way they looked at him. A small crack, barely visible, but there. One evening, Damien and Sienna sat across from each other at the dining table, a long table meant for 12, though only 2 seats were ever used. The city lights glittered outside the windows. The meal was plated beautifully. Everything was aesthetic, but the room was quiet. Sienna scrolled through her phone. Damien stared at his plate. No conversation, no laughter, not even annoyance. Just nothing. He cleared his throat. "Have you talked to my mother?" he asked. Sienna didn't look up. "She'll be fine," she said simply. That was it. No discussion, no comfort, no space for guilt to breathe. Just dismissal. Like Lydia was a task, a footnote, a loose thread that needed to be trimmed. Damien felt something tighten in his chest, a feeling he couldn't name, a heaviness that didn't come from regret, not yet, but from the absence of what used to be there. He pushed his plate away and stood. Sienna didn't ask where he was going. She didn't need to. She didn't care. Damien walked to the window and stared out at the skyline. The same skyline he once admired with hope, with hunger, with purpose. Now it just looked far away. Beautiful, untouchable, cold. He had made it to the top, but there was no one left there with him. It didn't fall apart in one day. It never does. It started with a canceled meeting, then an investor backing out, then a contract delayed. Small things, easy to dismiss. But patterns have a way of revealing themselves. Damien noticed it first in the way people shook his hand, too quick, too polite, too careful. People who once treated him like a rising star now spoke to him like someone who had peaked. Whispers began to spread, not about his business, not about his deals, but about the wedding. People were there. People saw. Not everyone talks, but everyone remembers. He embarrassed his mother, right? Cold man. If he can do that to her, imagine what he'd do in business. Reputation doesn't die loudly. It fades, quietly, like the last flicker of a candle. Sienna didn't notice at first. Or maybe she did, but she didn't care as long as the image held. She continued hosting gatherings, dressing the penthouse in fresh flowers every week, maintaining the life she curated for the world to witness. But Damien felt it. He felt it when conversations ended the moment he walked into a room. He felt it when people smiled without their eyes. He felt it when his emails went unanswered. Cole never reached out, and Lydia's silence grew heavier with each passing day. One night, Damien attended a charity event alone. Sienna stayed home, claiming a migraine, though truthfully, she was bored with low-tier philanthropy appearances. The event was in a glass ballroom overlooking the city, a place designed to make people feel small in the presence of wealth. Damien stood near the balcony, drink untouched in his hand. And that's when he heard it. 2 men behind him, voices low, unaware he was close enough to listen. He's slipping, his firms distancing themselves. Blake money might keep him afloat, but he's got no real loyalty under him. What did you expect? Man treated his own mother like a stain. People clock that kind of thing. A pause. You can't trust someone who forgets where he came from. Their voices blurred after that. Damien didn't turn around. He didn't speak. He didn't defend himself. He just stared at the city lights, the same skyline he once climbed toward. He didn't feel powerful, or admired, or respected. He felt, exposed. When he returned home, the penthouse was dark except for the warm glow of a single lamp. Sienna was on the couch, scrolling through her tablet. "Dinner's in the fridge," she said without looking up. Damien stood there for a moment, watching her. Once, he believed Sienna represented the life he had always wanted. Now, she felt like a mirror reflecting everything he couldn't admit. He sat across from her. "Sienna, be honest with me. Do you think I—" She cut him off. "Don't start with guilt. It's unattractive." He closed his mouth. She continued scrolling. The silence returned, thick, stale, suffocating. Later that night, Damien lay awake. He tried to remember the last time he laughed. Really laughed. Not polite, not performative, not strategic. Just laughed. He couldn't. His chest tightened. Something was wrong. Something was missing. Something was unraveling. And deep down, somewhere quiet and buried, he knew exactly where the unraveling had begun. Not with the business, not with the marriage, not with the reputation, but with a microphone and a mother standing alone. The unraveling didn't come with shouting. It came with silence. Damien returned home late one night, the city outside muted beneath fog and streetlight haze. The penthouse was dark except for a single lamp glowing in the corner of the living room. Sienna was there, legs crossed, face calm, fingers moving slowly across her tablet. She didn't look up when he entered. "Long day," he said quietly, loosening his tie. She murmured, still scrolling. He waited for her eyes to lift. They didn't. Something in the room felt shifted, tilted, wrong. He walked toward the kitchen to pour a drink, something to settle the noise in his chest. That's when he noticed it. The tablet screen wasn't displaying news or emails or schedules. It was open to messages, not hers. His messages he hadn't seen. Messages he had never sent or received. Conversations between her and someone else. Damien froze. He read the most recent message. "He believes everything I say. By the time he realizes what he gave up, it'll be too late." The reply, "Good. You know what to do next." Damien's heartbeat began to pound, not fast, but heavy, a slow, echoing thud in his chest. He didn't speak. He didn't breathe. He just listened to the room. Finally he asked, voice steady, "Who is that?" Sienna continued scrolling as if she hadn't heard him. A moment passed, then two. Only after she finished the message she was reading did she look up. Her expression was not guilty, not afraid, not apologetic. Calm, measured, certain. "Someone who understands what ambition requires," she said. Damien stared at her. Not the beautiful surface, the woman he had placed on a pedestal, but the architecture beneath it. The steel, the strategy, the hunger. "Everything I've done," he said slowly, "I did to build something better for us. No," Sienna interrupted, her voice soft as silk. "You did it to run, from where you came from who you were, from her." Lydia. Her name didn't need to be spoken. Sienna leaned back, crossing her arms lightly. "You wanted to belong in this world. I just showed you how." Damien's jaw clenched. "You encouraged me to push her away." "I encouraged you to choose your future," she corrected. "But you were already ready to do it. I didn't make that choice for you, Damien. You made it long before I arrived." Her words were not sharp. They were surgical, precise, accurate, undeniable. That's what made them worse. Damien looked at the reflection of the skyline in the window behind her, glittering, towering, unreachable. A life he had built, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, and all at once it felt hollow. "Did you love me?" he asked. A small smile touched her lips, the kind a person wears when they're about to tell the truth that ends something. "I loved what you were becoming," she said, "before you started looking backward." Backward. toward his mother, toward the life he had tried to bury, toward the promise he had once whispered under flickering streetlights. Damien felt something flicker inside him, a small flame returning after a long, cold absence. He spoke quietly. "I have to see her." Sienna didn't flinch. "No," she replied. "You need to stay focused. If you go back now, everything you've built will collapse. The board, the investors, the partnerships. They'll see you as weak, sentimental, emotional." Something in Damien cracked, just enough to let light in. "If the people around me think love is weakness," he said, "then I built the wrong life." Sienna stood slowly. "And yet," she said, stepping closer, "you built it anyway. It wasn't anger. It was truth." He left without another word. No jacket, no wallet, just keys. He didn't know where Lydia was. He didn't know if she would open the door. He didn't know what he would say. He only knew one thing. He was already too late. He just didn't understand. How late yet? He drove on instinct, not toward the penthouse, not toward the firm, not toward anything that made sense anymore. His hands knew the way, even if his mind hadn't accepted it yet. The apartment complex looked smaller than he remembered, quieter, as if time had tightened around it. He parked and sat there for a moment, fingers gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles went white. Finally he got out. The hallway smelled the same: detergent, old carpet, something frying in a kitchen down the hall. Every step echoed pieces of his childhood. He stopped outside her door. He didn't knock at first. He just pressed his palm against the wood. It felt strange to be so close to something he'd abandoned. He knocked lightly. No answer. He knocked again. Still no movement. A neighbor stepped out of the unit across the hall, an older woman with a headscarf and tired eyes that had seen everything. "Are you looking for Lydia?" Damien swallowed. "Yes, I'm her son." The woman looked at him for a long moment, long enough for recognition, judgment, disappointment, and pity to all arrive. "You should sit down," she said. He didn't. He couldn't. Not yet. "Tell me where she is," he said quietly. The woman's voice softened. "She got sick, real sick. She still tried to work. You know your mother. Always said she'd rest later. But her body started giving out. She hid it, told everyone she was fine." Damien's stomach dropped. "When?" His voice cracked. He cleared it and tried again. "When did this happen?" "A few months ago. Around the time of your wedding, I think." The hallway swayed. The air thinned. The woman continued, gently now. "She didn't want to bother you. Said you were busy. Said you were building a life. Said she didn't want to hold you back." Damien blinked slowly. Each word landed like impact. "She's at the hospital now. St. Mark's. Been there a while." His breath faltered. He turned and was already moving. Down the hallway, through the doors, into the car. He didn't remember starting the engine. He didn't remember the drive. He didn't feel the red lights or the turns, or the way the city lights blurred past the windows. He just moved. St. Mark's Hospital was cold in the way hospitals always are. White walls, quiet footsteps, machines humming in corners. The air smelled like antiseptic and something heavier, something human. He reached the front desk. "Lydia Carter," he said. The nurse typed, paused, looked up. "Room 417. He walked, too fast, too slow, both at once. He stood outside the door. His hand didn't shake because of fear. It shook because of realization. He had spent so long running away from where he came from that he hadn't noticed he was losing what he was running for. He opened the door. The room was dim. Monitors blinked quietly. IV lines hung like delicate strings holding someone to the world. Lydia lay in the bed, smaller than he remembered, softer, paler. The strength she carried her whole life now too heavy for her frame. Her eyes were closed, her breathing slow. Damien stepped closer. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. What words could he possibly use? Sorry? Forgive me? I didn't mean it? He stood there, a man who had climbed skyscrapers, unable to speak to the woman who taught him to walk. Then, her hand moved, just slightly. Her fingers curled, weak but intentional, as if she somehow knew he was there. He reached for her hand, but before he touched it, the monitor changed. A slow alarm, then a faster one. Footsteps rushing, voices calling codes he didn't understand. Nurses flooded the room. A doctor pushed him back. "Sir, please." Damien didn't move, couldn't move. His feet were rooted in the tile. He watched, helpless. They worked, and worked. And then they stopped. The room fell quiet. The doctor turned. His face said everything. Damien didn't cry, not loudly, not immediately. He just sank into the chair beside her bed, rested his forehead against her hand, and whispered the only words he had left. "I came too late." No one answered. Because some apologies don't reach the person they're meant for. He didn't remember leaving the hospital. One moment he was sitting beside her bed, her hand still warm in his. The next, he was outside, cold air hitting his face, city lights blurring in a way they never had before. He drove without knowing where he was going. The roads twisted into memory. He found himself in front of the old apartment building. The same chipped paint, the same dented mailboxes, the same flickering hallway bulb that always hummed. He climbed the stairs slowly, each step feeling heavier than the one before. Lydia's door was still unlocked. She had never feared the world enough to change that. Inside, the air was silent. Not empty. Silent. There is a difference. Her shoes sat neatly by the door. Her nursing scrubs hung over the chair, washed and folded, ready for the next shift she would never work. On the counter sat 2 grocery bags, fresh produce, milk, tea. She had shopped recently. She had prepared to keep going. Damien stood in the doorway, unable to move further. His chest didn't feel tight. It felt hollow, like something inside had been scooped out. He walked to the kitchen table. There, on the wood surface, were dozens of letters, some old, some new, all in her handwriting. He picked one up. The ink was faded. "My Damien, I know you are busy. I am so proud of you. Take care of yourself. I am doing fine." He picked up another I didn't want to call. "I know you have your new life. Just wanted to hear your voice, but it's okay. I'll try again later." Another. "Your wedding is soon. I don't want to embarrass you. I'll sit quietly. Just being there is enough." And then one more, newer, the handwriting shakier. "My heart hurts, baby. Doctor says it's nothing. I just get tired sometimes. Don't worry, I'll rest." Damien pressed the letters to his chest. His face didn't twist. His throat didn't break. No dramatic collapse, just stillness. Pain doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. He walked to his old bedroom. The room was untouched. The posters, the worn quilt, the small lamp with the chipped base, the math trophies that didn't mean anything to anyone but her. On the shelf sat the watch, not the shiny one Sienna had chosen, not the one that matched the new life, the one that meant something, the last piece of his father, the one Lydia had protected, the one she had tried to give him twice. He picked it up carefully. The metal was cold. He slid it onto his wrist. It was too big, just like when he was a boy. He sat on the bed. The silence wrapped around him. No penthouse, no skyline, no admirers, no applause. Just a man and the consequences of his choices. He finally cried. Not loud, not violent. The kind of crying that comes from a place so deep you didn't know it existed until it breaks open. He cried into his hands, into the pillow that still smelled faintly of her laundry detergent, into the hollow where her presence used to be. He didn't cry because she was gone. He cried because she had left this world still loving him. And he had left her world long before that. Hours passed, maybe minutes, maybe days. Time stopped meaning anything in that room. When the sun began to rise, Damien stood. He wiped his face. He did not feel healed. He did not feel redeemed. He felt changed. Something in him had broken, not shattered, broken open, the kind of breaking that makes space for truth, truth he could no longer run from, truth he would never forget. He didn't call Sienna. He didn't explain. He didn't try to negotiate his way back into the life he once believed he needed. He simply left. He signed the divorce papers without argument. Sienna didn't fight. There was nothing left to gain. The firm replaced him quietly. Emails stopped. Calls stopped. His name faded from conference tables and polished boardrooms. No public scandal, no uproar, just silence, the kind that happens when people decide someone is no longer useful. He sold the condo, closed his accounts, liquidated what didn't matter, and kept only what did. The watch. Only the watch. He moved back into Lydia's apartment, not because of obligation, not because of guilt, but because it was the last place he remembered being human. The paint still chipped, the air still warm, the floor still creaked in the same old spots. He didn't change it. He couldn't. Instead, he kept it exactly as she left it, the way love had lived in this space long before wealth had found him. Each morning he woke up before sunrise, not out of discipline, but because grief has a way of waking you before the world is ready. He walked to the care center where Lydia used to work. The nurses recognized him. Some stared. Some lowered their eyes. He didn't ask for a position. He just helped. He learned how to change linens without disturbing the mattress, how to spoon-feed someone who can't swallow easily, how to sit with someone who is afraid to be alone in the quiet. He learned the kind of labor that requires gentleness, the kind Lydia lived her life in. And at night, when the halls quieted, when the city dimmed, he would sit by the window and look at the skyline, not with envy, not with ambition, not with hunger, just with understanding. He didn't hate who he had been. He understood him now, a boy who wanted to give his mother the world and forgot to hold on to her while trying to reach it. People in the neighborhood began to whisper, not the cruel whispers from before, different ones. He's changed. He sits with people no one sits with. He remembers everyone's names. He listens. But Damien didn't want redemption. He didn't seek forgiveness. He simply lived. Quietly, softly, deliberately. One evening, as the sun bled gold across the city, he took a bus to the cemetery. He walked to Lydia's grave and sat cross-legged on the grass. He didn't speak at first. He just let the wind move around him. Finally, he placed his hand over the watch on his wrist, the one she kept safe his whole life. "I was wrong," he whispered, "but I'm here now." No dramatic music, no voice answering back, just the sound of the leaves moving like breathing. He stayed until the sky turned violet and the streetlights hummed awake. Then he stood. He didn't say goodbye, because love doesn't end. It changes shape. He walked home slowly, warm evening air against his face. A man who had once climbed the tallest rooms in the tallest towers, now learning how to live close to the ground, not fallen, not ruined, just human again.